On this Monday night, BC's deadly storm. The people swept away after record-breaking rain and one community's state of emergency. Breaking news, decision New Brunswick, how the province's Liberal leader has made history. The future of Justin Trudeau's leadership.
Did you sign the letter?
How many MPs are believed to have signed a letter asking Trudeau to quit? And the prison diaries of Vladimir Putin's most vocal critic.
I would prefer he would fight not from the grave.
His new memoir and how his widow is keeping his legacy alive.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The atmospheric river that drenched British Columbia with record-breaking amounts of rain has also taken lives. RCMP say the body of a woman whose house was washed away in Coquitlam, a Vancouver suburb, has now been found. And on Vancouver Island, one person is dead and another is missing after a road washed out there. The weekend storm shattered rainfall records across BC's south coast. In Coquitlam, more than 25 centimeters fell over 48 hours. And for some, there was no escape. That's where Neetu Garcha is reporting from tonight. Neetu.
Yeah, Donna, it had stopped raining earlier today, and now 3 days after that atmospheric river arrived, there is still a huge mess. The ground is soaked and roads are closed across the lower mainland. You can see the debris behind me. I am on a higher elevation gravel road here in Coquitlam, BC, where community members are mourning the loss of a teacher who was killed when her home was swept away in a mudslide. The school's principal had sent a letter out to parents confirming the passing of the longtime teacher, Sonia McIntyre. RCMP said Monday morning a 57-year-old woman was found dead following reports of the mudslide here on Quarry Road. There are aerials of the area hard hit by the heavy downpours and flooding in BC's south coast over the weekend. Affected communities are in cleanup and recovery mode. And on the west coast of Vancouver Island, Donna, a man is dead and another person is presumed dead after a washout on a road near Bamfield, BC, about 3 hours west of Port Renfrew. Two separate vehicles have been found submerged in the Sarita River.
It was a problem area, and it hadn't been for a while. Because of the drainage upgrades had taken care of that. But in this instance, with the tides and the storm as it was more than we expected.
The North Shore area of Metro Vancouver was also hard hit with streets, homes and businesses flooding. Some properties were put under a mandatory evacuation order, and the District of North Vancouver declared a state of local emergency Sunday night. Now, because of the mudslide, a section of that road behind me is still closed and a number of residents are stuck on the other side of the mudslide. RCMP say they are in touch with those residents who have been able to shelter in place, but there is still no timeline as to when the road will reopen. Donna?
Okay, Neetu Garcha in Coquitlam, BC. Thanks. There is lots of political news to get to tonight. An election is underway in New Brunswick right now, and in BC there is still no clear winner after the rain-drenched election there on Saturday. 47 seats are needed for a majority. The NDP are leading or elected in 46 ridings, and the Conservatives are leading or elected in 45. The Green Party has won 2 seats. But the margins are so tight in some ridings that recounts are underway, plus absentee and mail-in ballots still have to be counted. So whether the NDP can form government again in BC remains an open question. With me is Global BC's Legislative Bureau Chief Keith Baldrey. Keith, you know better than anyone how wild BC politics can be. What do you make of this?
Yeah, absolutely incredible, Don. I've never seen anything like this. We see a real surge in the BC Conservative Party, which historically has not elected a single member since 1978, hasn't formed government since 1928, obviously taking a bit of advantage of the wave of the Pierre Poilievre factor in BC. Now almost tied with the NDP, but again, as you say, a number of ballots, almost 50,000 ballots, still have yet to be counted. We're going to find that final count on Saturday. So a couple of ridings in play. One, a suburb in Victoria, currently held by the NDP by just 26 votes. Another suburb in Surrey held by the NDP by less than 100 votes. And one of the Surrey seats also held by the Conservatives, just over 100 votes. So a couple scenarios, 46-45 NDP with a partnership with the Greens, they could form a minority government. If the Conservatives can flip 2 of those seats and get to 47, they could form a majority government. But if they get to 46 and the NDP is at 45, that still gives the NDP the ability to govern with the help of the Greens. So as I say, unprecedented times, and it's absolutely fascinating to watch it unfold.
Like, just hypothetically, Keith, if the NDP does manage to form a government again, perhaps with the support of the Greens, as you say, how stable would that even be?
Yeah, hard to see how it would last for too long. Certainly enough stability to provide a budget next spring, perhaps, and with the support of the Greens pass that budget. But it wouldn't be a very busy legislative agenda for a government with just 47 seats, including 2 from a third party. Talked to a number of New Democrats who envision perhaps a second budget the spring of 2026 after the federal election is decided. And one thing they picked up on the doorstep is confusion over the Justin Trudeau situation. A number of BC residents thought they were voting in this election for the Conservatives to get rid of Justin Trudeau. Literally, that was what was playing out on the doorstep in some of these ridings. That will no longer be a factor if it indeed did exist in this election, if the next election were to be held in the spring of 2026. No one is expecting a 4-year mandate here, no matter who's in power.
Global BC's Keith Baldrey, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Thanks.
Okay, take care.
Now to New Brunswick, where there is a political sea change tonight. The Liberals have swept the Progressive Conservatives out of power. Blaine Higgs has not only been denied a 3rd consecutive term as Premier, he has lost his own seat. Susan Holt, who took over leadership of the New Brunswick Liberals in 2022, has won a decisive victory in the provincial election and will form a majority government. Heidi Petracek is at Liberal headquarters tonight. Heidi.
Well, the mood here is definitely one that's switched to a party vibe compared to earlier today when folks here were nervously awaiting the results to come in. But, you know, it didn't take long, less than half an hour, before it was clear that the Liberal Party of New Brunswick would form the next government, and a majority government at that. And that means that the leader, Susan Holt, is also about to become the new Premier of the province. Right now, Premier designate, but once that's all made official, she'll be the first female Premier that New Brunswick has ever had. It's been a 32-day campaign trail, and she really put herself front and center as the leader, as the alternative to the incumbent PC leader, Blaine Higgs. And folks here are sure excited at the outcome.
Amazing. This is an amazing event, amazing turnout, amazing results, even better than what I could have hoped for.
And Heidi, what about the former Premier, Blaine Higgs? He's been denied a 3rd term. He's apparently also lost his own seat. I expect there'll be a reckoning of sorts within the Conservative Party.
That is the other big change of this election, of course. I mean, a Premier who served 2 terms, who's had a lot of political experience, losing his own seat. And tonight he said in his concession speech, it is what it is. The New Brunswick voters have spoken. He said discussions will take place over the next few days as to what to do next, who will lead the party, how it will move forward, as the official opposition denied the 3rd term they were hoping for, and perhaps a sign that some of the positions the party was taking on certain wedge issues, such as gender policies in schools, didn't pay off in New Brunswick for this election. Donna.
All right, a change election in New Brunswick. Heidi Petracek in Fredericton, thanks. Federal members of Parliament are back in Ottawa after a break from the House of Commons. And though it's not on any official agenda, questions about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership are still swirling. This week, Trudeau is expected to face what could be the most serious challenge to his leadership. Mackenzie Gray reports.
Did you sign the letter to ask the Prime Minister to step down?
Even Liberal MPs are excited about the drama seizing their party.
I'm going to buy a big bag of popcorn and some pop and watch the show, just like all of you.
Mr. Badaway.
But Monday, most of them blew by journalists.
I probably asked this question 3 times today.
And did you sign the letter?
Or didn't want to speak publicly. Some saying they didn't know about the letter circulating with select Liberal MPs calling for the Prime Minister to quit. With sources telling Global News, it now has up to 30 signatures.
I haven't seen anything, don't know anything, and I'm certainly not going to comment.
Anything I have to say about this, I'm going to save for sharing with my colleagues on Wednesday.
Wednesday, when the Liberal caucus is set to meet, the potential inflection point between Justin Trudeau and backbench rebels, like Charlottetown's Sean Casey, one of the few publicly calling for Trudeau to leave, while other colleagues give him quiet support.
The ones that I have communicated with have all been remarkably supportive. So anyone that has something negative to say hasn't said it to me yet.
Casey hopes the letter is given to Trudeau on Wednesday and believes there are strong alternatives, including some already in cabinet.
There's been a half a dozen very qualified people who are rumored to be interested.
Multiple rebel Liberal MPs have told Global News they'd like Industry Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne as a replacement. But he, like the rest of cabinet, is publicly backing Trudeau.
You know, there's certainly issues that we need to address. We're going to address them in caucus later on this week.
Addressing them in the open, frustrating multiple backbenchers who support the Prime Minister.
So if my other colleagues that are not running, or a few that are running that want to focus on leadership issues, that's not productive right now.
But it's a focus that Pierre Poilievre, already 20 points ahead in the polls, is happy to see.
His priority is saving his political career from his revolting caucus.
While a chunk of Trudeau's caucus might want him gone, the Prime Minister has said on multiple occasions, Donna, that he plans to lead the Liberals into the next election. But first, he'll need to fend off members of his own party.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. 2 men in British Columbia have pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the 2022 shooting death of Rapudaman Singh Malik. Malik is the man who was acquitted in 2005 of the Air India bombing that killed more than 300 people. He had denied any involvement. In 2022, Malik was shot 7 times and killed in Surrey, BC. 21-year-old Tanner Fox and 23-year-old Jose Lopez were charged with first-degree murder. Today, they both pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder. The court heard an aggrieved statement of facts that Fox and Lopez were hired to carry out the killing. The pair had to be separated after getting into a fight in court today. Who hired them and ordered Malik's killing remains unknown. Fresh attacks in Lebanon coming up, how Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah's finances. Israeli forces are continuing to pound northern Gaza with airstrikes. The Palestinian Health Ministry says the Jabalia refugee camp was targeted again. Many of the injured were rushed to hospital and had to be treated on the floor. The UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, says Israel is preventing humanitarian missions from reaching the area where thousands of people already fleeing airstrikes have been again displaced. Israel's military is also still focused on southern Beirut. Last night, airstrikes hit branches of a financial institution Israel says is associated with Hezbollah. It appears the attack was intended to disrupt the militant group's day-to-day operations. Redmond Shannon reports on the impact.
In southern Beirut and in Hezbollah strongholds across Lebanon, a series of airstrikes overnight, targeting branches of Al-Qard al-Hassan, a financial institution which the US government says is used as cover for managing the Shia Muslim group's financial activities, but which also filled a gap left by the country's broken banking system, according to this analyst.
Hezbollah popularity has built on his capacity of providing social and economic services.
Sami Nader notes that although it operates like a bank, it's not registered as a bank. He says it's difficult to say yet how much this latest Israeli blow will affect Hezbollah's militant and political operations.
For the moment, Hezbollah is in a fight for its own survival.
I am going to declassify intelligence on a site that we did not strike, where Hezbollah has millions of dollars in gold and cash.
Israel claims the bunker is under a hospital in southern Beirut, but promises it won't be hit. The hospital director denied the claims and evacuated the building Monday night. Earlier, the US Special Envoy Amos Hochstein arrived in Lebanon to push for peace, as his country provides military support for Israel.
The world will stand by Lebanon and its leaders if they make the brave and the hard choices that are required at this time.
He met Lebanon's Sunni Muslim Prime Minister and its Shia House Speaker, whose divided parliament has gone 2 years without appointing a president. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrives in Israel Tuesday for his 11th visit to the Middle East since the October 7th Hamas attacks. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. Royal heckler ahead why a protester confronted King Charles. King Charles and Queen Camilla are on a 5-day trip to Australia, his first major trip since being diagnosed with cancer. And his speech to the Australian Parliament in Canberra today was unexpectedly disrupted.
Give us what you stole from us! Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people! You destroyed our land! Give us a genocide! This is not your land! This is not your land!
That's Aboriginal Australian Senator Lydia Thorpe, a vocal critic of the monarchy. She accused the King and the Royals of being complicit in genocide and destroying Indigenous land. When she was first sworn into Parliament, she accused the late Queen Elizabeth of being a colonizer. And one of her biggest grievances is that Australia is the only Commonwealth nation that has never signed a treaty with its Indigenous people. Just 2 weeks until the presidential election in the U.S., and both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are focusing their campaigns on so-called swing states. There are 7 swing states in this election, places that tend to swing from either Republican to Democrat. You can see them in purple on this map. In 2020, just over 21,000 votes in these states determined the outcome in a country of 330 million people. In other words, if less than 1% of the U.S. population voted differently, Trump could have won a second term. Jackson Prosco looks at how each candidate is trying to work that to their advantage this time.
It's now a battle of the battlegrounds, as Kamala Harris works to shore up her blue wall in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
In many, many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but the consequences of him being president of the United States are brutally serious.
While Donald Trump campaigns heavily in North Carolina, a state he must win.
It's hard to believe you have undecided voters. I do hear about them.
Just a handful of states will decide the presidency, and voters are already casting ballots. Early voting has shattered records. More than 13 million Americans have now locked in their choice.
I've been praying a whole lot for this election to go fair.
It shows there's interest. It's not just complacency.
Thank you, everybody.
In these final days, the former president is trying to harden his base, spreading disinformation about the federal response to Hurricane Helene.
They spent their money on illegal migrants.
While the current vice president is working to grow her support, campaigning alongside former Republican Liz Cheney in rural areas.
You have to choose in this race between someone who has been faithful to the Constitution, who will be faithful, and Donald Trump.
That strategy is running up against pro-Trump billionaire Elon Musk, who's offering a daily $1 million prize to swing state voters who sign his petition, a move he calls a show of support for the First and Second Amendments.
You know, there are actually pretty strict laws about running lotteries and sweepstakes. You know, Musk could be running afoul of not just federal regulations, but state regulations.
With so few undecideds, Musk's risky strategy may not do much to change minds, but it could influence who actually turns out to vote. And in a race this close, that could make a difference. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
In Texas, 4 people, including a child, are dead after a fiery helicopter crash in Houston last night. The aircraft went down just before 8 p.m. Everyone on board was killed. The helicopter struck a radio tower, causing an explosion. Authorities say it was privately owned and was operating as a tour flight when it crashed. The Eastern European country of Moldova has narrowly voted for membership in the European Union.
The people in Moldova have chosen their future. They chose hope, stability, opportunity. They chose Europe.
They won by a razor-thin margin. Just 1% separated the pro-European votes from the pro-Russian votes. Moldova's pro-Western president, Maia Sandu, is accusing Moscow of using criminal groups to try to tilt that vote, a charge the Kremlin has rejected. Next, the widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny speaks about his memoir and the fight for democracy, which she now leads. After her husband died in a Russian prison, Yulia Navalnaya never wavered. She had been by his side throughout his political fight against Russia's President Vladimir Putin, and now, ahead of the release of Navalny's memoir, she is as undeterred as ever. Mike Armstrong explains.
He is gone, but Alexei Navalny is still fighting. His memoir, being released this week, comes 8 months after his death in a Russian prison.
Over the summer,
speaking to 60 Minutes, his widow says the battle continues, even from the grave.
I would prefer he would fight not from the grave. And of course, it's very tough for me to say like this, but we can say so. Thank you so much.
Yulia Navalnaya has now picked up her husband's fight. She leads the anti-corruption foundation he started and is herself now officially designated an extremist in Russia. She'd be arrested if she goes back. That is, in fact, her goal. She says she wants Vladimir Putin imprisoned and would then return for elections
as a candidate
to replace him.
Alexei, are you worried now?
Now, the couple knew the danger when they returned to Russia together in January of 2021. Navalny had already lived through an assassination attempt. But rather than fight from exile, he went home. Putin's justice system sentenced Navalny to more than 30 years. He lasted barely 3.
I mean that he ordered this.
Navalnaya says Putin had her husband killed, but not before he could speak out one more time with his memoir. He started writing before going back to Russia, but continued from prison. Letters to friends and family, and notebooks smuggled out, given to his lawyers during court proceedings. Navalny's last entry is from September of 2022. His conditions in prison got progressively more difficult and restrictive.
Even from prison, he was very loud and he was the strongest opponent of Vladimir Putin.
Navalnaya says she wants Putin behind bars in Russia, that he should live under the same conditions as his political prisoners.
Thank you.
And that she is working towards making that happen as soon as possible. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Toronto, which is in the midst of a bit of a warm spell. Temperatures are in the mid-20s in most of southern Ontario. It's expected to stay that way for a few more days. So get some sun. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.